It is. It's open. Yeah. Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Radha Kunjabi Hari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Kunjabi Hari Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa Parudikacharya Ashtottara Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parudikacharya Ashtottara Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavani Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Oops. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I think it's text 41. Tapas, are you there?
Yes, Prabhu, text 41.
Okay. 41, that's on page 177. Except for your book. I'm looking at the margins, it's a special book. You'll see in the gutter at the top, you see the numbers. It's probably 175 for you, or around there. Do you see it? Third chapter, text 41. Yeah, near the end of the chapter. Okay. Okay. On this 9th day of May, 2022 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 3 entitled Karma Yoga, text 41 on page 177 of most of your books. Tasmat Tvam Indriyani Adau Niyamya Bhadatarshabha Papmanam Prajahi Yenam Jnana Vijnana Nashanam Tasmat tvamindriyan yadau niyamya bhadatarshabha papmanam prajahiyenam jnana vijnananashanam. Tasmat tvamindriyan yadau niyamya bhadatarshabha papmanam prajahiyenam jnana vijnananashanam. Tasmat tvamindriyan yadau niyamya bhadatarshabha papmanam prajahiyenam jnana vijnananashanam. Go ahead. Tasmat tvamindriyan yadau niyamya bhadatarshabha papmanam prajahiyenam jnana vijnananashanam. Go ahead, Manji. Tasmat tvamindriyan yadau niyamya bhadatarshabha papmanam prajahiyenam jnana vijnananashanam. Anyone on Zoom?
Tasmat tvamindriyan yadau
Tasmat tvamindriyan yadau
niyamya bhadatarshabha
niyamya bhadatarshabha
papmanam prajahiyenam
papmanam prajahiyenam
jnana vijnananashanam.
jnana vijnananashanam. Word by word meanings. Tasmat, therefore, tvam, you, indriyani, senses, adau, in the beginning, niyamya, by regulating, bhadata rishabha, O chief amongst the descendants of Bharat, papmanam, the great symbol of sin, prajahi, curb, he, certainly, enam, this, jnana, of knowledge, vijnana, and scientific knowledge of the pure soul, nashanam, the destroyer. Translation. Therefore, O Arjuna, best of the Bharatas, in the very beginning curb this great symbol of sin, lust, by regulating the senses, and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. Purport. The Lord advised Arjuna to regulate the senses from the very beginning so that he could curb the greatest sinful enemy, lust, which destroys the urge for self-realization and specific knowledge of the self. Jnana refers to knowledge of self as distinguished from non-self, or in other words, knowledge that the spirit soul is not the body. Vijnana refers to specific knowledge of the spirit soul's constitutional position and his relationship to the Supreme Soul. It is explained thus in the Srimad Bhagavatam 2.9.31. Jnanam padamaguhyam me yad vijnana samanvitam sarahasyam tadangam cha guhana gaditam maya. The knowledge of the self and Supreme Self is very confidential and mysterious, but such knowledge and specific realization can be understood if explained with their various aspects by the Lord Himself. Bhagavad Gita gives us that general and specific knowledge of the self. The living entities are parts and parcels of the Lord, and therefore they are simply meant to serve the Lord. This consciousness is called Krishna consciousness. So, from the very beginning of life, one has to learn this Krishna consciousness, and thereby one may become fully Krishna conscious and act accordingly. Lust is only the perverted reflection of the love of God which is natural for every living entity. But if one is educated in Krishna consciousness from the very beginning, that natural love of God cannot deteriorate into lust. When love of God deteriorates into lust, it is very difficult to return to the normal condition. Nonetheless, Krishna consciousness is so powerful that even a late beginner can become a lover of God by following the regulative principles of devotional service. So from any stage of life, or from the time of understanding its urgency, one can begin regulating the senses in Krishna consciousness, devotional service of the Lord, and turn the lust into love of Godhead, the highest perfectional stage of human life. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So my voice is still a little rough, though hopefully it'll last. So this section at the end of chapter 3 is very significant for us. Arjuna, if you recall, it began with a question by Arjuna. Attakena payuktoyam papam charati purusha. Arjuna said, O descendant of Vrishni, that's Krishna, O descendant of Vrishni, by what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if engaged by force? And Krishna answered, Kama Esha Krodha Esha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion, and later transformed into wrath, and which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. So Srila Prabhupada continues to explain in this purport, and he mentions it in the purport we read today, that kama, or lust, is simply a perverted reflection of the prema. That's our eternal, natural position. Lord Krishna, in the form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, answered the first question of Sanatana Goswami in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Who am I? Why am I suffering so much in this world? And how can I get rid of the suffering and return to my original state? So the answer is this classic answer, which is kind of an axiomatic for the whole Krishna consciousness movement and the Gaudiya Vaishnav line. So he says, Jivera Swarupoi. This word Swarup means our actual original nature. This is the first lesson. This is not really who we are. This is the temporary covering, the body. Everyone's identifying with the body. I'm born in this family, I have this language, this is my parents, this is my husband, this is my children. But all of that is just a temporary situation. We've had countless lives before in which we had different bodies, different species, different husband, different everything. So it's all changing. But we are the unchanging consciousness within the body. That's the first lesson of Bhagavad Gita. And if we understand it and believe it, it changes it should change all of our calculations of what we should do in this life. What does it mean to be successful? What should we strive for? And what should we avoid? So, this verse of Lord Chaitanya says, Jivera Swarup, this idea of the Swarup. Swarup is our original position, our original form or nature. What is our original Swarup? Jivera Swarup, Krishnera Nityadas, an eternal servant of Krishna. In our embodied state, in ignorance, we're serving everything else but Krishna. We're certainly serving our senses. When you get hungry, you got to eat, right? Serving your belly. Serving those lungs. We learned how that's not a given either. Right? In other words, there's so many things we have to do in order just to exist in this bodily state, this material state. So, Jivera soy Krishnera Nityadas. And he goes on, Jivera tatasta shakti, Krishnera tatasta shakti, Beda prakash. So there's three different concepts there, and they're all like foundational for our whole philosophy. So we're eternal servants of Krishna. We are Krishna's marginal energy. Tatasta means sitting on the margin. Margin between what? Between spirit and matter. We have the freedom. This is our freedom, our independence, minute independence, to become absorbed in matter or to become absorbed in spirit. to serve the spiritual energy, to serve Krishna, or to serve the material energy. Even though we're under the illusion that we're masters of nature, of matter, it's obvious that we're not. Otherwise, we wouldn't face a serious drought condition here all along the West Coast. Nobody wants it. Now, here we're lucky that for years they were planning for this, and so there's a lot of conservation, so we'll be able to last a little longer. But we have to serve. We have to serve the body. We have to serve the boss. We have to serve everything, and we can benefit from that service. There's no question about it. For a while, as long as everything goes okay. But we're serving matter. We're not serving spirit. So that's what marginal means. We can choose to serve Krishna, which is to our best interest, or to serve matter, which will cause a whole lot of suffering. Old age, disease, and death, and then it doesn't end. Birth. Go around again, and again, and again, and again. And not always in a human form. So, it's the threefold miseries. What is the adhyatmic misery? And body. Body, yeah. In other words, everything is okay. You got enough money in the bank, and you're, you got a good job. You're living in San Diego. You're not deeply in debt. But you're in tremendous anxiety because of something may happen, or some friend said this, or a million different things. Or you might get COVID. I mean, I don't know if I have it yet, but I might have it. So that fear, that anxiety itself is a form of misery, isn't it? It can cause tremendous problems. So that's one. Then you have the adibhautic miseries, which are simply caused by other living beings, oftentimes by human beings, but not necessarily. Animals, bugs, cause you misery. And then the adidaivic miseries, the droughts, the hurricanes, the earthquakes, all of this. There's an overlap. You can say, well, that's happening because of what we did, putting all that carbon dioxide in. So is it adibhautic or is it adidaivic? What's the difference? It's a misery. But these are general categories. So they're always either happening to us or threatening to happen to us. Right? And that even the threat of it's happening is another kind of misery. Anxiety. Pay the insurance bill. Oh, now I'm safe. Anyway, that's what this material world is all about. Krishna says in the 8th chapter, Dukkali Mashashvatam, that this world is full of miseries and it's temporary. Any situation you have is temporary. So why are we in this world instead of in the spiritual world? The spiritual world is fully described in Srimad Bhagavatam and other great scriptures. It's beyond these miseries. It's beyond the changes. Your life is eternal. You don't die there because you're in a spiritual body. And we have a whole line of realized souls, great intellects and tapasvis and yogis and learned sages who testify to the truth of it. And so if we have enough faith to begin the process, then we can gradually realize also. So kamesha krodha, what keeps us here? What is it? Why are we here? So Krishna says, the answer to your question, Arjuna, which is, what is it that impels us to do things that we may even know are wrong? Sometimes we don't know they're wrong, but we still do them, But even though, in other words, what sometimes overcomes even our best reason and forces us to do something that may produce some little flickering pleasure, but has a very bad reaction that we know is wrong and bad for us, and it's material desire. Here says kama. Now everyone knows kama usually means sex desire, but it's more than that. It's any desire for material pleasure, especially when it becomes very strong. And when that kama is frustrated, which it must be eventually, then anger comes. And if you can't express your anger, then you turn it inward and become depressed. That's another result of all this. This arises from the mode of passion, mahashano, all devouring, very sinful. You should know this to be a real enemy. So the enemy is within. The enemy is in the mind. This is all in the mind. So how do we deal with it? So then Krishna starts to describe. You recall text 38, he says there's different degrees of this. covering. Dhume navrite vanir. He describes it. This covers our real knowledge. As fire is covered by smoke. So you can see some of the fire, but the smoke is... Or as a mirror is covered by dust. That's a little thicker covering. Or as the embryo or fetus is covered by the womb, really covered. The living entity is similarly covered by different degrees of this lust. So the animals they can't become Krishna conscious. They're much more covered. And their senses, they have a certain set of desires that just impel them to go here and do there. Super soul is giving them intelligence to do that. And they're not responsible. There's no karma for the animals because they don't have the intelligence. Plants would be even more covered. They can't even move, you know. Human beings are like the fire and the smoke. We can actually wake up from this covering and become Krishna conscious, and the karma can be turned back into prema. And we don't have to be impelled by our senses. The senses become our friends because we use them in Krishna's service. So then he describes the covering. Avritam. Avritam means covered. Jnanam. The original knowledge is covered by different degrees of this lust. In other words, we're in this world primarily because of ignorance, which we brought on ourselves by turning away from Krishna and becoming absorbed in matter. And many, many lifetimes of trying to enjoy the senses through this lust. So by this eternal enemy known as lust, covers our real knowledge in an enemy in the form of kama. Dushparena alena. It burns like fire, never satisfied. Like these fires get going, and we've had experience here in California. They just devour a whole forest, you know, and the wind is blowing. So you can't. It has. If you give it more fuel, it will just burn higher. You can't. In other words, you can't exhaust the kama by saying, "Okay, I'm just going to burn out the senses." Then it doesn't work that way. You know, the senses may become burned out, but the kama will go to another sense. It can go to your mind. You know, that's also a sense, the sixth sense. So this kama has to be sublimated. It has to be turned back into prema. So then he starts analyzing the whole situation. Indriyani monobuddhi means the senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of the lust, of the desire. And we can experience that when you talk about addiction, which is what Arjuna was really asking about. So the classic addiction, let's say heroin addiction. So you're not addicted at first, but you think, well, let me try it, you know, because for whatever reason, everyone else is doing it. So you try it, and before long, you know, it produces. I've never done it, and I never will, but they say it produces like there's no more pain, you know. For a while, you're because after all, it's like with not methadone, morphine. Morphine is used, you know, so it's the same root. Opioid. But it's very addictive. We know there's an opioid crisis, you know, people are taking this OxyContin, which means constant anyway, horrible. So then what happens? Then you say, you know, I know this is bad for me, but I'm getting the shivers, I'm getting the withdrawal symptoms, you know, I gotta have it, you know. So just to be somewhat normal, you know, to get relief of the misery, now you have to take this. So you're addicted. The senses are telling you have to do it. So, but it can also be in the mind. The mind can have this, you know, some subtle sense gratification that you have that you're impelled to have, even though you know it's taking you away from Krishna consciousness. Senses, mind, and the intelligence. The intelligence, you know, addicted to some novels. I mean, when I was growing up, you know, I got very attached to novels by Charles Dickens, a good writer, you know, and Mark Twain, you know. So I would go deep into the night. I forgot, the science fiction writing. I would lie in bed, I'm, you know, 10 years old, and I still remember this one story. It was a very short story. It was all about, the whole story is like 2 pages long. And it's like this being who's in outer space, and he's hungry. You know, and he sees this little fruit blue and green fruit, you know, and he pops it into his mouth. It was the earth. Oh my God! I'm looking outside the window. It could happen anytime. You know, so that's a subtle attract. You know, it's millions of movies and all these things. It's all intelligence, you know, and the mind to some degree, you know. So the lust can be in each one of them. And Prabhupada said these are like strategic positions of your being, the body, the senses, the mind, intelligence. And the enemy, it's towards the enemy, has taken over and is covering your real knowledge. So then today's verse. Therefore, one has to control the senses. That's the first thing. Now, but Krishna doesn't say how to control the senses. And not just to control them, because he just said in a previous chapter, remember, what will repression accomplish? Or I think early in this chapter, what will repression accomplish? So you can't just repress them and say no. And this is where Krishna consciousness comes in. How to use the senses in a wholesome way. From whatever platform, and this is Lord Chaitanya's great gift. Doesn't matter. You don't have to go off to the Himalayas or take yoga and learn to breathe, do the breathing and all that stuff. From day one, you can be addicted to this, addicted to that. Come in here and chant, and not quietly. You chant loudly to the drums, and you dance, and you're engaging all the mind and the body and the senses and everything. In that way, from the beginning. This is Lord Chaitanya's great gift. It's yoga, and it's purifying for the senses. And then chanting, dancing, and feasting. Philosophy will come. Philosophy we can have. But chanting, then, and the problem with, a lot of chanting, he would go for an hour. This is not so much dancing, because people were used to it, but some would get up and dance. But he's chanting. The Hare Krishna mantra is so powerful that it can purify the senses, mind, and intelligence all at once, depending on your sincerity. And the wonderful thing is, if you try it a little bit, you get a taste. You get this transcendental pleasure. That's not by lust. It's not the senses contacting the sense objects. It's Krishna from within the heart. And that pleasure negates, that cures the addiction to the lower self, lower reality. So that of course, that's not all mentioned here, but it will be mentioned in later chapters, the chanting, and of course in our other literatures. So that's what when he says indriyanyado niyamya, this is how we control the senses. Don't try to repress them, engage them. Here, Bhakta Tom, that was made back in 1973. Come on, help sweep the floor. By that time I'd already, kind of was trying to move in. But that was some of the engagement. And then there was, washing the pots. We've had some experience with that. And after those duties are done, then we all go out on the street and chant. This is one of the things that we're missing these days. Daily Sankirtan. There's a letter Prabhupada wrote to Ray Rama. Now, Ray Rama was the first editor before Hayagriva. He was the very first editor, and he was editing Back to God, and he had been a professional before. He had been writing comics, And so he joined, and so Prabhupada said, okay, you can help edit the Back to God magazine. And he also edited the first Bhagavad Gita. We had an abridged Bhagavad Gita, and he edited that. So it was very valuable service. So, but Prabhupada's always pushing, where's the book? So Ray Rama wrote to him and said, well, Prabhupada, I don't have time to engage in all of the temple activities and do that. So Prabhupada said, okay, you do your service, but it's essential that you go out every day on Harinam for the hour, at least an hour. And then the 16 rounds. Those are the two main things. And he's reading all day, so he didn't tell him read the books, So that collective chanting, of course, most of it we do here is in the temple. But now whenever I do my laundry, it seems to be the time when they go on Harinam Saturday night, down to the beach. So that I'm doing my laundry, and so I hear clink, clink, clink. And there's Balaram on the mic chanting Harinam. I come out of the laundromat, and there they are, I just gave them going to the beach. So that's the Yuga Dharma.
And it's authorized in the Shastra. Kalu doshanade rajanasti eko mahadgunad kirtanadi Krishna se mukta sangha param brajed. In the 12th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, it's near the end of the book, there's a whole litany of descriptions of the evils of this Kali Yuga. How in this age people's longevity will become shorter and shorter, life will become shorter, the mercy will become less and less, memory will become less and less, goes on and on and on like that. And so then Shukadev Goswami says, Kali dosha. In summary, this Kali Yuga is an ocean of faults. It's not ideal for practicing yoga. That's pretty obvious. Certainly not the meditative yoga. So, Kali dosha nide rajan, O king, Kali dosha nide rajan, asti eko mahadguna, but there's one very good quality in this age, redeeming quality. Kirtanadeva Krishnasya. By singing the kirtan of Krishna's name, mukta sangha, one becomes free from attachment, sangha, to all of these material things. In other words, you overcome the lust. And parambrajet, you go to the supreme abode, just by that chanting. But it has to be done purely, ultimately. So that, how to come to the pure chanting, that's the sadhana bhakti that we're practicing. So Krishna is then the next verse, which we can read. And then I'm going to tell you what this is all about. I brought my big suitcase here with something in it, and I want to show you. So quickly we'll go through the next verse. Are there any questions, comments on this verse? Okay. So now he's going to analyze the hierarchy. Indriyani paranyahu indriyebhak parang manaha manasastu parabudhir yo buddhe paratastu saha. The working senses are superior to dull matter. Mind is higher than the senses, intelligence is still higher than the mind, and he, the soul, is even higher than the intelligence. Purport. The senses are different outlets for the activities of lust. Lust is reserved within the body, but it is given vent through the senses. Therefore, the senses are superior to the body as a whole. These outlets are not in use when there is superior consciousness, or Krishna consciousness. In Krishna consciousness, the soul makes direct connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the hierarchy of bodily functions as described here ultimately ends in the Supreme Soul. Bodily action means the functions of the senses, and stopping the senses means stopping all bodily actions. But since the mind is active, then even though the body may be silent and at rest, the mind will act, as it does during dreaming. But above the mind is the determination of the intelligence, and above the intelligence is the soul proper. If, therefore, the soul is directly engaged with the Supreme, naturally all other subordinates, namely the intelligence, mind, and senses, will be automatically engaged. In the Katha Upanishad, there is a similar passage in which it is said that the objects of sense gratification are superior to the senses, and mind is superior to the sense objects. If, therefore, the mind is directly engaged in the service of the Lord constantly, then there is no chance that the senses will become engaged in other ways. This mental attitude has already been explained. Param drishva nivartate. I don't know if you recognize that. That's from the last chapter, text 59. Vishayavanivartante nidaharasiddehina. If the mind is engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord, there is no chance of its being engaged in the lower propensities. In the Katha Upanishad, the soul has been described as Mahan, the great. Therefore, the soul is above all, namely the sense objects, the senses, the mind, and the intelligence. Therefore, directly understanding the constitutional position of the soul is the solution of the whole problem. With intelligence, one has to seek out the constitutional position of the soul, and then engage the mind always in Krishna consciousness. That solves the whole problem. A neophyte spiritualist is generally advised to keep aloof from the objects of the senses, but aside from that, one has to strengthen the mind by use of intelligence. If by intelligence one engages one's mind in Krishna consciousness by complete surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then automatically the mind becomes stronger. And even though the senses are very strong, like serpents, they will be no more effective than serpents with broken fangs. But even though the soul is the master of intelligence and mind, and the senses also, still, unless it is strengthened by association with Krishna in Krishna consciousness, there is every chance of falling down due to the agitated mind. So this is the science of Krishna consciousness, is that we're in a situation in which our senses, mind, and intelligence are filled with material desires. We've experienced it before. The memory is there. And so we need a system of purification. The very first words of Lord Chaitanya in the Shikshastika, Chaito Darpana Marjanam, that by this chanting of the holy name, especially congregational chanting, the Chaita, the consciousness, is like a mirror, becomes cleansed of dust. And we can see ourselves as spiritual beings. And when it becomes clear to some degree, Bhava Mahadabhagnini Vapanam, the blazing fire of material life is extinguished. What keeps that blazing fire going? Our ardent desires to enjoy in this world, which are never satisfied, and at the time of death they're occupying our mind. So we get another body to try to keep enjoying, and then we have to take account of our karma and all. It's a big mess. But if we can turn our mind to Krishna, absorb our mind in Krishna through His holy name and everything that flows from the holy name, then we can conquer this enemy known as lust, which Krishna will mention in the next verse, and which is an introduction to the next chapter. Okay, I kind of wanted to take a few minutes now to explain why I brought this heavy suitcase here. In that suitcase is a great treasure, actually. There are a bunch of Vyasa Puja books from previous years. Now, these Vyasa Puja books are usually sold during the one day a year. Yeah, I'm going to get off here and open this. And then sometimes we don't sell them all. We buy some for the temple. And they kind of built up over the years, and they didn't know what to do with them because it's like only for the current year people are interested. So they were thinking, well, what can we do? They're just taking up so much room, So they were thinking of throwing them in the ocean. I said, no. Give them to me. Give them to me. I produced this book for the last 35 years, so. So that's what we have here. And you're going to help me to save them. And I have an inducement. They're free, but there's a price. No, here. That's not what I wanted to say. These are. My first trip to Vrindavan was 1975 for the opening of the Krishna Balaram temple. And on that trip, we met on Parakram, 2 different holy places in Vrindavan, place where Krishna performed his pastimes and everything like that. So every time we went to a place, I had this little urn that I had bought, little brass urn, And I put some dirt, some of the holy dust from that place. So that's been sitting on my shelf now for like 47 years. And I didn't know what to do with it, but now I know. I've got these little envelopes. I put some in here. So everyone here can have one, but there's a price to pay. You have to take one of these books. Is it a deal? Now this is the real thing. I swear. So you can just put it on your altar, or you can take a little bit of your tea and put it on your head, and you'll be going to Vrindavan. Some of you may have never been to Vrindavan. How many of you have been to Vrindavan? You've been there? Okay. So, is it a deal? I'm going to open this case now. And I think we have more books in here than we have people in the audience. But for extra credit, you can take 2 books.
Soil never goes bad.
Sorry?
Soil never goes bad. Like this soil you got
It doesn't go bad. Yeah, and you can see the little shiny pieces of chintamani in there, which is pretty amazing. I know this is unusual. I'm off the camera. Sorry about that. See, here's what we're talking about. This is even wrapped from 2019. This has the last offering written by Bhakti Swami. Very well. Any takers? Oh, yeah, take. Would you like some dust too?
Thank you so much, please.
There you go. I have more at home. Let me do this.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anyone else?
Okay.
Now I have that actually 2019. This one is from 2008.
Now you should know we only print 500 of these a year, so they're actually collector's items. Just hold on to it and put $10,000. Here's one. 2012. Any takers? Let me get to yours.
All of them are Vyasa Puja, Prabhu?
They're all Vyasa Puja. Did I get? Oh, I signed that one already. I'll buy your name in there. If one, you can come on another day and I could sign them all. Anyone else for one from 2019? Okay. This is great. You like, these are like my babies, You're saving them. Anyone else?
Good cheer.
Okay, here's this one. Is a different one. This is 2016.
He wants the oldest.
I'm sorry?
I'll take the oldest.
The oldest one. This may be the oldest one. Oh, 2005.
Yeah, I'll take it. How old are you in 2005? I was in 8th grade. Thank you.
This is great. So I've got 2016. I've got a wrapped one here from 2008, and I have 2012. You want one song? Which date? 2012.
It looks like new. It's so new inside from inside. Like
Yeah. Written on the coated paper.
And where's this from again?
Huh? That's from Vrindavan. That's Krishna's hometown in India. The whole most holy city.
You mind if I write that down?
Please do. Vrindana. Vrindavan. Who didn't get? Oh, by the way, I've got bags for you to put the books in case you don't have anything to carry. Does anyone want a bag? These are standard bags. This is the first time here.
Yeah, but. The Powerball. Yeah,
Way more valuable than Powerball.
Yeah.
I was gonna go serve.
The waves are not right today.
And you already got yours. You didn't get your bag. You need a bag?
Last.
I didn't give you dust? Oh, little bag. That's much more valuable. Just see. Now, we may do this again tomorrow.
Ah,
Yeah. So this is great. I came with about 10 and I only have 2.
the only thing is we can take it international.
Well, okay.
They don't have us oil.
Maybe you have a friend.
But I do keep it in
There's room in that bag for two books. All right, I got 3 left. Anyone want to take seconds? Huh?
Whatever they would need. Go ask.
You can take 2. That's one more. Oh, I see. You can take 2? I'll give you a bag. All right. So it's very successful. Thank you.
Give one to my friend.
Yeah, sure. Anyone need one of these bags to carry? Yeah. Thank you so much. Still have a few minutes left.
What this book entails, Vyasa Puja, what's the purpose?
This is every year. It's full of homages to Srila Prabhupada on his birthday. Vyasa Puja is the appearance day of the spiritual master. Comes usually mid-August to September 1st.
So it's coming soon.
Yeah, Prabhupada actually was born on September 1st, 1896. But it was one of those years where there's an extra month You know, we had an extra month, so it was a little later than usual. Well, okay, 5 minutes. Let's see. All right, we're going to finish this chapter. We'll start a new chapter tomorrow. Evam buddhe param buddha sangstabhyatmanam jahi shaptram mahabaho kam rupam dhurasadam. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind, and intelligence, O mighty Arjuna, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, Krishna consciousness, and thus, by spiritual strength, conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. Purport. This third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is conclusively directive to Krishna consciousness by knowing oneself as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead without considering impersonal voidness the ultimate end. In the material existence of life, one is certainly influenced by propensities for lust and desire for dominating the resources of material nature. Desire for overlording and for sense gratification is the greatest enemy of the conditioned soul. But by the strength of Krishna consciousness, one can control the material senses, the mind, and the intelligence. One may not give up work and prescribed duties all of a sudden, but by gradually developing Krishna consciousness, one can be situated in a transcendental position without being influenced by the material senses and the mind. By steady intelligence directed toward one's pure identity. This is the sum total of this chapter. In the immature stage of material existence, philosophical speculations and artificial attempts to control the senses by the so-called practice of yogic postures can never help a man towards spiritual life. He must be trained in Krishna consciousness by higher intelligence. Thus end the Bhagavatam purports to the third chapter of Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of karma yoga, or the discharge of one's prescribed duty in Krishna consciousness. So, okay, well, that's all recorded. And there's 3 minutes left. So we'll begin the next chapter. And it's interesting that he says, this yoga, he begins the next chapter, even vivasade yogam. Well, what yoga is that? He didn't describe a yoga. But he says, by superior intelligence, control the lower self by the higher self. So you need a process of yoga. And that process he's going to outline in this chapter 4. And most importantly, he'll tell about the parampara, how it's come down. You know, I spoke it millions of years ago, and it's come down, and but due to the force of time, it's become distorted and lost. So he's starting a new parampara with Arjuna. Okay. So let's see. I'll give you 1 or 2 poems. Lust, kamadinam. Kamadinam kadina katita palita durni deshas. Tesham jata maina karuna natapano prashanti. Utsid jaitan hadiyotapate sampratan labdha buddhis tramayata akshadanamabayam mandayung swatmadase. In how many ways have I sought to obey the seductive demands of my wicked desires? They've shown me no mercy, but on I've gone shamelessly trying to quench lust's unquenchable fires. But now I'm rejecting these hellish desires, for my higher intelligence now has awoken. O Krishna, O shelter of fearlessness, please let me serve you with faith that will never be broken. And that's very much pertinent to what we've just been reading. In other words, we have to serve. That's our nature. Are we going to serve mammon, or are we going to serve God? This is right in the Bible, right? Are we going to serve our senses, our mind, our intelligence, our lower self, or our higher self, which is the highest self, which is Krishna? That is the choice. And Krishna consciousness gives us a practical way to make the choice of serving Krishna. And the result is, the perfection is no more coming back. Going back home, back to Godhead, to resume our lost life, eternal life of bliss and knowledge, which is our natural nature, our eternal, our swarup, natural nature. So that's what this Krishna consciousness is all about, and throughout the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada reiterates it in the purports, and Krishna will give us a very good summary of the philosophy by which we can perfect our lives.
Okay, we'll get ready for kirtan. I don't know if I'm going to be able to lead. Can you help out with that? To meet me? Okay. I'll play the drum. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol.